I'd like to welcome you all to the Photographic Universe II. My name is Ann Gaines, and I'm the Dean for the School of Art, Media, and Technology, which is the home base for our photography programs here at Parsons. And it is a tremendous honor to host the second installment of this biennial conference, and we celebrate all of your presence and participation at this momentous event. So, I'd like to get started by recognizing everyone who supported, organized, and sponsored, and really made this conference possible. It is, you have my deepest gratitude for the opportunity to engage in the critical discourse through the really broad range of expertise that will be represented here over the next 2 days. And so first I'd like to recognize Chris Boot, and please stand. I'm here. Sarah McNear and Barbara Escobar from the Aperture Foundation, and Karen Kuoni and Naomi Klein from the Viralis Center for Art and Politics at the New School, Pam Tillis, I know it's around here somewhere, maybe outside greeting people, from the New School for Public Engagement. And finally, my thanks to the photography programs here in AMT, and to all of the students and faculty who supported this endeavor. But my sincere thanks and congratulations to our BFA Director of Photography and Assistant Professor of Photography, Arthur O. For realizing this vision again. So I also want to extend my thanks to Parsons, our Executive Dean Joel Towers, our university, the New School, and President David Van Zandt and Provost Tim Marshall, as Parsons is uniquely situated as an art and design school in a research-driven university, which allows us to continuously and rigorously investigate the state of art and design and invest in progressive thinking. And social innovation and sustainability are really at the forefront of our education, our research, and practice. In the School of Art, Media, and Technology, we have the opportunity to offer a broad range of art and design programs of study. And it's through our photography curricula that our students are breaking boundaries globally through collaborative, creative, and interdisciplinary approaches, as they have the relevant capacities to really evolve 21st century photographic practice. In addition to our focused undergraduate and graduate programs, photography plays a relevant and present role in the education for all Parsons students. Starting in the fall, every student who enters Parsons will be required to take an imaging and a time-based course, and these are integral components to their undergraduate education. And through these courses, students will think, they'll invent, they'll explore, they'll create, and they'll play as they really build the base for their education, but also their future. So we all recognize the relevance of the medium in our current culture. The continuing radical shifts in the developments in technology, these are unshakable realities, and they really compel us as, through education, industry, and media to reflectively direct our progress. So every other year, this conference is a singular moment to gather in this forum and celebrate the robust history of photography, to advance the medium, to reflect on this critical moment at hand, and also to look towards, collectively, the future of imaging and knowing. So thank you. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Chris Boot, the Executive Director for the Aperture Foundation.
I just want to say a few words of welcome. This is a great pleasure for us to participate in. We have the highest regard for you, Arthur, and we love working with you and everybody at Parsons. Aperture Foundation is a publisher of physical objects, a book and a magazine, but we see publishing at this point in time as a three-dimensional activity, where multiple platforms apply to each of our projects. The in-person component is really important. Our participation here is in that sense directly linked to our publishing activities. We get ideas from this. They translate into whether that's articles in the magazine or projects. That it's all a fully integrated publishing operation with the experience at the heart of it, of things like this, the opportunity to come and hear really interesting people with really interesting ideas. And I look forward to staying as much of today as I can. Thanks to everybody at Parsons and the New School for making this possible, and you all for coming.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to now invite Karen Quoney, director of the Veralist Center for Art and Politics, to come and give her welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you very much, Arthur. It's a real pleasure to be here. The Veralist Center was founded 20 years ago to examine the intersection of art and politics, and we do so through a variety of public programs, workshop, exhibitions, and publications. And Photographic Universe is one of our most ambitious programs, and we're honored to be collaborating with Aperture Foundation and Parsons on this program. It's a particular pleasure this year because, again, a number of speakers are speaking today and tomorrow who have worked with us on a number of programs in the past. Among them are, for instance, Tom Keenan, Simon Critchley, Ariella Azoulay, Vicky Haddam, Fred Richkin, and many others. I would like to express once more my deep appreciation to Arthur, the director of the BFA program at Parsons, and a wonderful colleague here at the New School. We're honored. We're also pleased by the title of the conference. The Photographic Universe is both, I think, an ambitious claim that photography really is a universe, or has the complexity of a universe on and into itself. To me, it also suggests a degree of self-criticality, or even irony or humor, that I think will invite a critical assessment of where these boundaries, or the intersection, or the overlaps between the photographic universe and other universes lie. So without further ado, thank you all for coming. Thank you to Parsons, Aperture, and everyone else, and the speakers. Bye.
Thank you, Anne, Chris, and Karen for the welcomes. And I'd like to get started, with our first session. I wonder if did you guys figure out who's going to go first? Okay, so I'm going to invite Katrina Sleuth, the director or curator of digital programs from the Photographers Gallery in London, who was generous enough to be able to come out and join us in our discussions on photography. So I'd like to welcome her up to the stage now.
Hi everyone. I hope you'll forgive me for reading so I can keep perfectly to time. Today I want to focus on one area of photography which I consider to be significant in understanding the present shifts which are happening in consideration of image sharing and authorship. Cat photography. A form of photography online rivaled only in its plentitude by pornography, images of and by cats clog up Facebook feeds, breed into memes, and have inspired countless photobloggers in search of a seductive subject to sustain them. It is therefore no surprise that the proliferation of cat photographs, whether breaded, shamed, scanned, macroed, or otherwise, has arisen in parallel with the proliferations of screens in society, which are in constant demand for more and more content. In spite of their ubiquity, cat photography has sustained little critical attention, and so it seemed natural that one of the exhibitions for the first year of the digital program at the Photographers Gallery should attempt to deal with it. And today I'll be drawing on the contributions for the exhibition For the Lol of Cats, Felines Photography in the Web, and some of the texts which were commissioned, which will form part of an online publication, which we will be releasing shortly. My interest in cat photography is part of a long-standing concern with photography's place in computational culture. It is clear that the historical emphasis of photography on the one hand, with the representational content of the image and authorship on the other, proves to be inadequate in dealing with networked images. Here, meaning is inherently unstable because the act of authorship is a never-ending process of assemblage, annotation, manipulation and attunement that can take place at each instance when the image file is presented on the computer or camera's screen. In this respect, the networked image embodies the paradoxical coexistence of two incommensurable logics. Rational, visual representational logic according to which the image on our screen refers to a cat somewhere in the universe, and a recursive viral logic of intensity, simultaneity and incompleteness in which the image refers only to itself. The tension the online photographer faces today, therefore, is to be acknowledged as an author with all the economic and social capital that entails in an economy of information which privileges the real-time exchange of multiple simultaneous authorless images. Photo sharing platforms combine the tantalizing potential of visibility or publicity with the persistent threat of invisibility. We upload, we like, we wait for recognition. And I think this paradox can be seen here with the example of Jimmy Leo's cat on Flickr. And he is one of Flickr's foremost cat photographers. But you might recognize this cat from this very famous cat meme, the "I made you a cookie, but I eat it" meme. And here we have the comments beneath the image at that point where the Flickr community recognized this image of his cat circulating online, which had received over 12,000 votes on I Can Has Cheeseburger, and was well known on the internet, yet he had no clue about this. In the end, you see in his comments, he went through a period of mourning and like, what does this mean that my cat has global notoriety? But then he came to terms with it. Although more recently his cat has appeared on an AirAsia ad, and this sort of image sharing he's not so okay with. He never licensed it as Creative Commons in any way too, if you're interested. So in an age of orphaned images, metadata offers the salve through which a photographer can assert some control over meaning. IPTC metadata offers photographers support, protological support, to be recognized as an author, allowing the contextual information to travel with the file. But within the scopic regime of the web, such information is commonly stripped at upload by Web 2 platforms and is ignored by Google's indexing, as it can invariably be spammed. And this issue of metadata is a huge contentious issue in the UK, in which they want to make it illegal to strip metadata in images. But rather than see metadata as a means through which to anchor the image, it underscores its very undecidability. It is less about what the image represents, but its relational potential. As Daniel Rubenstein notes, it is largely irrelevant whether an image is tagged with chalk or cheese. What matters is that through tagging, the image is converted into a meaningful substance that enters an expressive relationship with other media objects, such as the class of objects tagged with cheese. In the face of an image tsunami, the key to understanding what has been called an economy of attention involves gaming the appropriate algorithm and understanding the particular affordances of traffic. Cat photographs are a beacon for human interaction, channeling interest towards stories, generating fame, money, or traffic for their distributor/authors. It is no surprise to hear that bloggers report a spike in traffic each time they feature cat-related content. A select few of these cats become internet superstars or lolcats, spawning their own mythology and characters, solidifying into memes. And with the right cat, you too can exploit the new business models of the Web 2 regime. According to Wired, Maru, on the right there, who was in the show, has upwards of 168 million YouTube views and is rumoured to have generated enough ad revenue to buy his owner a new apartment. And this is his photo blog. Interestingly enough, his owner is cloaked in secrecy. No one knows who she is. And I had to go through a US sub-publicist to actually get in contact with her. Paul Neve, the man behind Cats That Look Like Hitler, now shares his tips on monetizing cat photography. This is from his slide. So you can see how you've got the merchandise and the Google AdSense. And I think this brings into question what non-commercial use might mean in the context of image sharing and licensing. Cats have also played their part in helping memes to become one of the most powerful aesthetic genres of the Web 2 era. And here's Longcat, in case you know him and his fame. In her essay for the exhibition, Olga Goryanova describes the meme as a problematic aesthetic object. She states, on the one hand, a meme to become itself and produce a meme family has to be inventive, that is to say innovative, aesthetically concise, succinct. It needs to employ an aesthetic form of which all elements work in unison to produce the effect desired. On the one hand, a meme employs a de facto reference to subconscious or explicit imitation, machinic self-copying, turning into the masses, reinforcing what is already there, working for the mainstream. She describes the way in which memes as an aesthetic genre are conditioned by the techno-social architecture of 4chan. For those who may not be familiar, 4chan is an image board that does not have an archive or a registration mechanism, and the turnover images posted is very fast. And they usually will they will appropriate poor cat owners' images and turn them into memes that way. And she notes that it's through endlessly reposting an image, luring others into liking, altering and reposting it, that the machinery of production was finally honed and begot memes as a genre. Here, the specific affordances of the interface engendered memes, which has in turn spawned other platforms, such as meme factories, which is the commercialization of this kind of work. But ultimately, as Daniel Palmer argues, photographs of cats are now almost as redundant as the photographers who take them. The emergence of cats as photographers in their own right would seem to underline this. The idea of a cat photographer was foreshadowed as early as the 1870s. Harry Pointer produced a postcard called The Photographer Studio in Brighton of a cat beside a plate camera apparently engaged in focusing. For Pointer, this was probably a humorous act of self-mockery emerging from debates at the time concerning the value and role of the photographer. With the automation of photography today, you don't even need to press the button, and the recent emergence of cat cams provide their owners with the opportunity to see as the cat sees. And here are two well-known cat photographers. We had Nancy Bean, a three-legged cat from Devon in the UK, and Cooper, an American short hair living in Seattle. And here are some of the images that Cooper has taken. Both cats have been involved in exhibitions which present heavily edited sequences of work. It's no accident that Cooper's owner, Michael Cross, is an award-winning film director and editor. I will leave the legal experts to ask who, if anyone, owns the copyright in a photograph taken by a cat. However, what we might learn from the cat cam, as Daniel Palmer notes, is that humans are increasingly incidental to photographic production, but play a potentially decisive role in the photograph's circulation. So, wrapping up, for curators of photography, the accommodation of cat images within the museum remain problematic. When preparing lolcat content as part of the Life Online display at the National Media Museum in Bradford, Tom Woolley notes that in an institutional context, sourcing copyright for lolcats, the humorous cats, may be a thankless, almost impossible task, especially for a country like the UK, which doesn't have fair use in its copyright law. But beyond this, the very ubiquity and hybridity of the digital screen image would seem to present obstacles to established forms of cultural authority based on collection and the discourse of aesthetic modernism. the particular historical forms of authority and knowledge embedded in cultural institutions, which have previously collected and interpreted objects of visual culture, are now overwhelmed by what has been termed image capitalism, in which, according to Achille Mbembe, images have become a constitutive dimension of the capitalist forces reshaping our effective world. They are, therefore, no longer merely an automatic, replicative reflection of the real world. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Before I introduce Eric, I just want to mention, the format for each of these sessions. We have 5 sessions today, and each session will be there will be 2 speakers. Each will present, a presentation for about 10 minutes, and thereafter we'll engage in a dialogue about, the materials and the topics that they talked about in the presentations. And there will be, some time left at the very end, for questions from the audience. And also, just, for the sake of time, we're projecting the bios, the more thorough bios of our speakers on the left and right screens. So, that's why the introductions from me will be very brief. I'd like to now invite Eric Saltzman, who is one of the founders of Creative Commons, and is also, a very established filmmaker and attorney, who is now going to speak about, some of the issues that they're addressing in Creative Commons. So, Eric.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you to Parsons for assembling this conference, and to Katrina. I need to find my slides over here. So while we're doing this, we are going to answer the question that we were left with: who owns the copyright in the photograph that the cat took? And it may not have been asked or answered before, but we're going to answer it before the morning is over. How many of you are familiar with Creative Commons? Okay, and so I think what I'm going to do briefly is explain what Creative Commons is. I was invited to do that, and we'll talk about what it is, how it works, what it's for, and then also I was asked to talk a little bit about fair use. So I'll talk about that. That will certainly use up 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions as we go through. Creative Commons is a user interface for copyright. And what that means is copyright is the legal regime that governs the use of creative work. And what we decided to do when we founded Creative Commons is to figure out an interface for people to use it, people who wanted to give advance permission for the work that they made. So a brief discussion about copyright. Copyright protects the original creative expression in a fixed medium. So it doesn't protect facts. It doesn't protect ideas. It's automatic. It didn't used to be automatic, but as soon as you lift your pen from the paper of your memoir, or as soon as the shutter is snapped, that copyright belongs to the creator. And it's what we call a strict liability regime, meaning you don't have to know that something is copyrighted or not, or who the proprietor is. If you use it without permission, you are already engaged in a legal issue. We started Creative Commons in 2002 because the world changed when the digital world began to pick up steam. And the world changed because in the analog world, there were many possible uses of a copyright work, and among all possible uses, some implicated copyright and many didn't. So for example, if you were to sell a book the first time, that was the exclusive right of the copyright owner. The person who sells the book the second time after you've bought it, that's a use that does not implicate copyright. You could lend the book. You could do lots of things. And then, of course, there's that little blue circle there, which is fair use, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Then along came the digital age, and the uses that implicate copyright law when something is digitized is pretty much, maybe all is an overstatement, but pretty much all uses of the work. And that's because almost all uses are a copy. It's a copy on a hard drive, it's a copy on a flash drive, it's a copy that you email, it's a copy. And again, what copyright talks about is copies. There is a sliding scale or spectrum, if you will, of copyright. On the left is full copyright, on the right is public domain. And public domain is variously described, but it's the body of creative work that is not under copyright control. It can fall out of copyright, or individuals can decide not to claim any copyright. So it goes from all rights reserved to no rights reserved, and Creative Commons is in the middle. Creative Commons to one side or the other of that middle. It's some rights reserved, and it is one of a group of what are called copyleft licenses. There are many that are used for software. Ours is not primarily or best used for software. And there are various stripes or flavors, if you will, of the Creative Commons license. One thing I want to say, Creative Commons operation, the licenses that we offer they're a simple click-through process. Click, click, click. You attach our license information to your file, but it is not a rights laundromat. So if you are not the person or the group that owns the copyright, you can't slap, well, sadly, you can slap, but you may not slap a Creative Commons license on it. So the dean talked about the innovative work being done at Parsons. If you look at innovation online, there's the Ethernet, which connects computers, TCP/IP connecting the network, the web connecting websites, and we like to think that Creative Commons connects content. And again, content implicates copyright. Again, here's my slide from earlier. We're in the digital world pretty much now. Copyright regulates copies, and in the digital world, every use is a copy, and thus the presumption is every use requires permission. One question is, why bother? And two answers to that, not being legalistic, but one is ignoring the law doesn't scale, particularly for institutions. I think we're going to talk about that. And secondly, tagged content seeds the creative ecosystem, particularly content that is among the more permissive of our licenses. I'm rushing now to get through because I've got to talk about fair use. Here are the stripes of the licenses. They all do different things. I'm going to get a chance to talk about them. Here's what our license chooser looks like. Flickr, of course, was an early adopter of the Creative Commons system. There are millions of photographs on Flickr under Creative Commons license and the different types of licenses. Europeana is another example of a terrific use of Creative Commons. Everything uploaded to Europeana has to be under Creative Commons license. This is their statement. And we have 40 now or so international jurisdictions. Now I'm going to rush through fair use. Okay, back to copyright. Remember, in the digital world, every use is pretty much a copy, and that's why we're here. Section 107 for the Copyright Act talks about fair use. And I will, again, I know this is very dense, but we're going to get to talk about it. Fair use is a concept that exists in the United States. There are other similar concepts elsewhere. The point about fair use here is that while the parameters or the considerations are described in law, each case is a case that stands on its own. So this is both a fortunate and unfortunate thing. Katrina and I were discussing earlier, in England there is no fair use. And so things are narrower. Here there is fair use, but there is no bright line answer in any particular case whether something is fair use. Why did that happen? In so many areas in copyright they've been the subject of intense negotiation, lobbying by regulators, companies, and they've got things worked out so they want them in a compromise. So you can use something this way, but you have to pay this much for it. You can't use this, but you can use this. In fair use, there was never that type of lobbying and industry negotiation, so it is a kind of standalone situation. Anybody know about this one, Annie Leibovitz? So here's the photograph on the left, and here's the photograph on the right, which led to an interesting court case. Anybody guess the outcome of the court case? Anybody care to guess? Who doesn't know? So, of course, Leibovitz and Vanity Fair brought a suit against the people who made this ad for whatever it was, Naked Gun Replayed or something, which said due in April, which was very cute. The court right around downtown here said it's not infringing because it's a parody. A parody is one of the things that fair use probably is meant to allow. On balance, they said the strong parodic nature of the ad tips the first factor significantly toward fair use, even after making some discount for the fact that it promotes a commercial product. Commercial product is something that fair use is generally not supposed to allow. How about this one? Anybody know this one? This is another famous one. This is a photograph by, I forgot his first name, Rogers, and then copied by Jeff Koons. Anybody want to guess the outcome of this one? Hard to distinguish between this one and this one, for me. This is infringing. They found it was not a parody. And why was it? Because they said it was a satirical critique of materialistic society, but it didn't need the photograph to do it. It wasn't a critique of the photograph, it was a critique of us. And then we know about this one. This one was settled, so we don't have a court decision about it. Well, could be, looks like. But this was a photographer and then an illustrator named Shepard Fairey who made the work. Unfortunately, he lied about it. He got caught lying, and he then faced a criminal procedure. I'm pretty done. The Visual Rights Act also is interesting. We're not really going to talk about it here, but it is the American equivalent of moral rights, giving the artist the right to, or the creator, to have some say over attribution and that sort, and reputation, that sort of thing. So I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it was so quick. Okay, shall we discuss, just to start off, who owns the copyright to the cat photograph?
Yeah, that would be, I'd love to get a definitive answer on that one.
So there are no definitive answers in legal practice, but the way to look at it is copyright only. We already went through a copyright class. Does anybody want to propose the answer? No brave person. So copyright protects creative work by humans. And so it's really a matter of how much creative work did Cooper, his owner, do, and how much did he do?
Yeah, well, I think this also relates to the question of what happens when robots take photographs and how they're used. For example, the London congestion travel zone is a fully automated field of photography where cars go by, triggers a photograph to be taken, that gets looked at by a computer algorithm, and something in the real world happens, right, based on whether it's infringing or not. And so there's all these kinds of images that get taken by ostensibly non-humans. How do we regulate the flow of these kinds of images?
I think I can tell you the answer in the United States. It's pretty clear those are not copyright. Mm-hmm. Additionally, if they were taken by the U.S. government, I don't know. I don't know if those are local or not. The U.S. government doesn't maintain any copyright in its photographs for use in the United States. But in any case, there's not enough creative element in those to be copyrighted.
This is something very specific, I think, as well. How do you define a creative element?
So the creative element is what copyright is all about. Copyright is meant to protect creativity and to reward creativity. That's the idea behind it. So.
And when you're thinking about photography in relation to that, of course, there's a long history of thinking of, well, the debate of whether the camera is the thing that takes the photo or the photographer. This idea that the black box, Flusser, I think, says that is a black box that controls the output, not the photographer. How do you determine in photography what actually is a creative, a process of creative authorship?
I think the answer is you just look how much creativity there is in it. But certainly anybody picking up a camera and taking a picture, that's enough. And setting up a computer algorithm to take the picture, unless there are a lot of creative decision-making elements in that algorithm, wouldn't be.
Because, of course, the other thing affecting cultural organisations is the fact that, well, in the UK at least, it's illegal to document your own paintings and photographs with photography, even for insurance purposes. Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you hear me now? In the UK, it's difficult for cultural organisations as well because, well, for the Photographers Gallery, we obviously have, the rights of photographers we're interested in, but also the organisation, their kinds of rights to archive itself, to produce educational material and that sort of thing. And copyright is quite a complicated area in relation to that. So I wonder, what the solution is then when you can't actually photograph your own paintings or whatever, because technically it's illegal. I mean, copyright is the most broken law globally. I read. This is correct, is it?
I don't know, but it sounds right.
So I was interested in what you were saying about the rights laundromat that you touched upon. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, the idea behind Creative Commons I went through very quickly, and it was kind of legalistic. But the idea is really for people who want their work seen, for people who want their work shared. We need now to have some way to do that. It's too tedious and too cumbersome to try to find, in many cases, to try to find the person who took the photograph or owns the photograph, try to contact them. So we tried to set up a system that works more or less automatically once the copyright owner decides to make the decision to make it permissive. But that requires that individual or that group to make that decision. And sometimes there's a misunderstanding that by taking a photograph somewhere and then going through and tagging it with a Creative Commons license, you have changed the ownership or changed the structure or given permission. And the answer is no, you can't give permission. You have to be the right person.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting that public organisations, at least in the UK, if you get public money to do a digitisation project now, sometimes you'll be asked to make it available using Creative Commons, and it's quite difficult. I know that the National Theatre has all sorts of copyright holders, from the person who writes the play to the designer to all these things, that one would have to clear all the copyright for something before doing that. So it's interesting because it's like there's two kinds of elements there. It's not as simple to just slap a Creative Commons license on. And interestingly, in cat photography, you'll see people taking someone else's cat photograph, adding some text, and then releasing that under Creative Commons, which is a great example of that sort of issue.
Right. So the idea of having things be more open is not just in photography, of course, but in all sorts of things. So, for instance, in scientific work, you talked about in the UK, there's a requirement from some public funding that photographs or other work be under public license, some public license, one or another. And in the United States now, there's a movement which is gaining some traction that publicly funded medical and scientific research also be under the output of it, whether it's the data for data mining, or the write-ups about it also be under public license, Creative Commons license, or something so the public can have that benefit. And I think that's a movement that's growing. And as well in the open education resource area, there are lots of now online educational resources that are under Creative Commons license. So it's an absolutely growing field. But why would somebody taking a photograph want it? What is your experience? Why do they want it under a public license?
Well, hopefully, through my talk, is sort of talking about the relationship between visibility, traffic, and hopefully some kind of outcome in relation to your own kind of notoriety or fame, really. But also, of course, to share and to engage in dialogue with other people. But I think it's interesting under certain kind of photo sharing platforms how visibility and attention work in relation to the way in which images are valued. I think you were saying that you think there's a shift between this quest for the image or object as original to being more visible. Do you want to say a bit more
Yes,
about
you and I,
that?
we had a brief discussion by email. And I don't want to get in over my head. I'm not a photographer or work in photography, but it seems to me that my understanding earlier, maybe now we're getting back to the beginning. Earlier in photography, having everybody see the photograph was kind of amazing, and it may be what you wanted. Then later on, with a photograph by a well-known photographer 30 years ago, maybe the most important thing was to have absolute control of those rights before the digital age. But now with the digital age, it seems to me that the highest value, the most intrinsic value of the photograph, it may not even be its quality, I don't want to say, but it may be its ubiquity.
I think this was echoed in some of the discussions I've had with photography students, and I'm sure when we open up the discussion, we'll hear more about this. I've heard two different approaches. One which is, oh my God, I'm sitting here doing photography, and yet a person over there hasn't spent all this money on their education. They've made this image of a cat, maybe, I don't know, and it's been seen by 1.5 million people. Yet I'm wandering down to the gallery, sticking my print up in the wall, and maybe 30 people in Shoreditch are going to see them. To the other hand, which is, people students who might be doing photojournalism who see the appropriation or sharing of the image as a lack of control of, they might have a really significant relationship with what they've photographed. They want to have some control over the meaning of that. And then when that image gets shared in a different context, there's a complete lack of control there.
I'll tell a quick story about that. A good friend of mine is director of a biolab in France, and he took some wonderful images, photographs, of electron microscopy of the moment of fertilization in a sea urchin. A sea urchin, because the eggs are very big and you can see everything happen. And then as well, videos of the cell division. And he asked me, should he put it under Creative Commons license? And I said, if you want a lot of people to see it and use it, and if your main interest is in education, I think so. It's up to you. And he made the decision. And then he found it on a creationist website in Texas, basically talking about that this proves that the world is only, 7,000 years old. And he said, what can I do about that? And the answer was nothing.
Yeah.
So,
wait, excuse me. Can you explain that again?
Yes.
Found another law that said it wasn't.
No, not a law. My buddy put these wonderful photographs and videos of sea urchin over.
No, I understand that.
Right.
I'm saying why couldn't
He put it under Creative Commons license, which said, use it, just give me attribution. But there is no control about how it's used. So this creationist group in Texas was using it and then putting under it captions that said, this shows that the world is only 7,000 years old. And they had a whole explanation why, using his scientific.
And of course, one issue that comes up is once you've granted your work under Creative Commons, you can't change your mind.
Yes. So maybe should we open the discussion?
Yeah.
For all the people in the audience, wait for the mic so that we can record your questions and everyone can hear.
Okay. So it's more of a scenario. If you take a photograph of, say, like Robert Mapplethorpe's work, how they're very into the copywriting of it, like the documenting who uses it. So say you take a screen capture on your computer screen of a Mapplethorpe work, and you put in your own metadata, and you copyright it, and you print it really big. Is that your image, or do you have to pay the money? Or can I license that?
I didn't know the last part. Can you what?
Could I put that under Creative Commons myself if I put my face on it? Like if I paint my face, where's the line? I'm very confused in the gray area between both of you.
Yeah.
It's a confusing place.
And I'm trying to make work right in the middle. So it's I'm trying to understand the legality of it all.
Well, I should say first that this quick discussion about copyright, this is a year-long subject in law school and a lot of reading and all that. So it would be hard to do justice to it here. I wanted to just give some flavor of it, and it would be hard for me to answer lots of specific questions, but I'll answer that one. If the photograph is copyright Mapplethorpe or his organization or whatever it is, you may not take the photograph, add something to it, and then having transformed it or whatever.
But if it's an image taken, because you can take images on your, nowadays, you can take images with your computer.
Yeah, but okay, this.
Photograph.
Right. I was going to talk about how my 25-year-old son is using Creative Commons, but when he was 12, he was downloading music, et cetera, and his younger brother said to me, "Dad, isn't that like stealing from Tower Records?" That's when there was Tower Records. Anybody old enough to remember? Now that's the end of that. Then the 8-year-old got to be 10 years old, and he was downloading songs. And I said to him, "Wait a minute, you're the kid who told me that was like stealing from Tower Records." And he said, "Yeah, Dad, but it's free." So, yes, you can do it.
Can you Creative Commons music?
Richard Nixon used to say we could do it, but it would be wrong. And by that he meant go ahead and do it. So that's
That's what SoundCloud is, essentially. Okay.
okay. I think, I think that's as far as we can go with that.
I was just wondering what you guys thought of Tumblr, which is a pretty obvious it's sort of based around image appropriation. It seems to have copyright infringement sort of built into the mechanism of it, and it's very common and important distributor of artistic and other images nowadays. Specifically, also, I was wondering if you guys know about the art blog, The Jogging, which kind of very specifically asks for other artists to submit, and it's very sort of number-based. So the number of notes or how many reblogs or how many likes it gets is very kind of important conceptual factor in the mechanisms of that conceptual art piece. So I'm just wondering, A, if you know about it, and if you do, what you think of it, and if not, just Tumblr at large. Thanks.
Yeah, I know about both those things. I think what you see on Tumblr is the kind of intensification of what I would call the networked image, where there's this absolute flattening out of culture, where you'll see, a Mapplethorpe next to, I don't know, an ad for chocolate, I don't know. But it's this complete fascinating platform in which it makes it so easy to reblog something. And I think the politics of the platform are very interesting in relation to authorship, in that the reblog maintains a kind of trail of breadcrumbs through to the original author. But of course, if you want to get some kind of cultural capital on the platform, you might want to take an image down to your desktop and then post it on Tumblr, which would basically cut that trail of attribution back to the originator. So it's a very interesting platform to begin to thinking about how value works in relation to images online. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. You know, the mass reposting and reposting the conversation, kind of like the meme culture and
Right.
4chan, this kind of creative.
Right, that's what we're
Practices,
saying. And it's
yeah.
partly a celebrity culture.
Well, you can become a celebrity through your impeccable taste and ability to
Right.
curate and share images.
I didn't mean so much that, but unless something is known, seen by lots and lots of people, it doesn't exist really.
Good point. But also, it's interesting to think, where does the image begin and end online in relation to that? So there is this question of authorship. Does the actual practice of pulling all these images together into an interface, can the interface be seen as an image in itself that you have created from all these different parts? So I think I'm very interested in how the image is almost borderless in these environments, and how, you know, thinking about the photograph as a discrete cultural unit with these kinds of boundaries is very difficult, and you know, we need to really start rethinking how we think about photography ontologically, but we're not going to go there right now. But I would imagine
You want to go there?
I'm really interested in how lawyers begin to approach these kinds of questions, because you've obviously got the world of photography theory over here having their discussions with one another about how meaning and value is created with photography and how that is changing. But I think a lot of people see there's a disconnect between what's happening in the courts.
I'll say a
and
little
how
bit
that's
about
being-
that, but
yeah.
then we should get back to your subject because it may be more interesting. I shortchanged the woman over there who asked about the Mapplethorpe photograph, because we talked about fair use before, and fair use isn't something that only large organizations can take advantage of. Anybody can, and you may well have fair use rights to use a Mapplethorpe photograph for your own purposes. On the one hand, you may be flying under the radar, so that's fine. On the other hand, the problem with fair use is each time you take a risk, because nothing is codified so clearly that you can depend on an answer in any one particular case. That's why I showed those two examples before. As far as Tumblr is concerned, I should look at, I don't know the terms of use of Tumblr, but I bet they protect themselves pretty well. And in the in a law that sits next to the Copyright Act, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, it has a safe haven for the ISP, and Tumblr would probably fit as an ISP, Internet Service Provider, in the definition, and they probably have a safe haven for their legal liability, but the user may not.
Check the terms and conditions.
Right, all those things we can't even bother to scroll through them. We just check them now. Right.
So does that mean, I mean, this is another debate that I've seen other people be very anxious about, and that's the question of the terms of service for Facebook, which needs to be able to say, we will distribute your images on your behalf through the network,
Right.
yet at the same time seem to indicate they can do whatever they want with it. And a lot of photographers in the UK are very suspicious of platforms like this.
Right, I would
And
be suspicious too. For Facebook users, sometime in the next months there'll be a very interesting announcement about Creative Commons that we can't make yet.
You've heard it here.
But I want to go back to your discussion of the ontologies under which, if it's interesting.
Well, I guess I was trying to hint at that a bit in relation to thinking about this question of what happens when the photograph is no longer a discrete object that can be everywhere at once on any point on the network. Also, those questions about the increasing automation of photography and where authorship lies in relation to that. If you think that today I can take a photo of you now, it can ping up to my Flickr account, which can then synchronize to my mother's mantelpiece in Sydney in real time. I mean, I think it's quite interesting the way in which facial recognition algorithms and so on are calling on to identify, archive, and transmit images. So I guess this also relates to questions of what a photograph is, its definition, what an author is, what an audience is, what it means to interact. The act of viewing an image online can completely change the way in which it's disseminated. Adding a tag to an image or a hashtag can change its direction through the network. So I think these are kinds of questions that certainly my peers in the UK and I are very interested in sort of working out. Is it the representational frame of the image, or is it everything else that happens around the image now? Is what's inside the image the last thing we should be thinking about? Is it this system of reproduction and dissemination, ownership and aggregation that is the key issue, which I was hopefully trying to sneak into my cat presentation there.
The innovation in visual technologies has actually transformed modes of communication and collectivity and community. And a lot of what this conversation is about is kind of about how will capitalism and monetization accommodate these shifts. So I'm wondering, is there a space to sort of imagine otherwise? And how would we do that?
I think you've nailed it on the head there. I think, what kinds of agency, what kinds of collectivities happen on the network? And of course, this relates to what you're trying to do with Creative Commons. What is a commons?
Yeah. That's the question that was most interesting to us when we started Creative Commons. And that's a very big and interesting topic, but maybe this provides some insight into it. So when we started, we had to decide which kind of licenses. We needed to make it simple, but we needed to also provide the type of licenses we thought people would use. And at first, we thought every license under Creative Commons license, there are 6 of them now, that's click, 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 and you choose which one you want, and that's that. So all of them require attribution to the artist or the photographer or whatever it is. But then there are various stripes after that. So some allow, to your question, commercial use, and some don't. And at first, almost everybody, we have a graph of this. It's quite interesting. Early on, now we're 10 years old, early on almost everybody chose NC for non-commercial. And I did myself actually licensing some things. And then we began to see a change in that, so that now there's much less non-commercial. If you don't do non-commercial, then you allow commercial use. And I think the reason is that people are seeing that the more easily things can move around, the less restrictions there are, the fewer train wrecks you have if you want your work seen widely. So if you can imagine railroads being built across the country on different gauges, when they meet, nothing works. Similarly, if you want to combine work, say in a teaching platform, or allowing derivative work or transformative work, but one is under a non-commercial license and one is under commercial license, the more permissive license is the one that's going to have the most play. And even though commercial sounds as if it would be sort of crass or in a realm you don't want to work in, if you put that restriction on, things slow down. So my own feeling about this is I no longer think of the world, I did, in terms of commercial and non-commercial. I used to think that the internet was, there was the shopping mall side and the research side or the artistic side. And I don't think of that anymore. I think things are becoming mixed. They need to be mixed because the barriers of use are breaking down, and the things that are going to be most successful in both realms will be like that. I don't know if that helps at all, but that's how we are thinking about it now.
And I think it's also, what kind of hopefully why I was using the cat is this idea of image sharing and network spectacle in a way, and what kinds of social relations are going on there. On the one hand, Dr. Lop Lop, who set up the Somebody Else's Cat Flickr group, which dominated Flickr, was actually, it wasn't really about the cat when you speak to him about that, and what kinds of relationships that formed on that group. In fact, he met his future wife through the image sharing of cats.
Was she a cat hater who was online because she hated the cats?
I can't confirm or deny that, I'm sorry. But on the one hand, there seems to be, great potential in these technologies, but at the same time, there is this kind of, it's like any technology, paradoxically, the spectacle of this is also something to be aware of. And that's why sharing also can be about monetizing content, image traffic, and so on.
And
so
decisions about control or not control.
Yeah.
So I told the story about my friend and his reproduction images. We had a meeting with the European Space Agency. We had a conference in Warsaw. They came to the conference, and we had met with them several years before, and we wanted we were suggesting, as NASA's images are public, maybe they should want their images to be public. And they resisted it for 2 years. And then they came to us and said, let's get going. And we sort of explained to them how it would all work with their images. And then I was curious, and I asked why the change from last year. And they said, because our astronauts are irritated that only American astronauts' photographs are in circulation and nobody knows who we are.
And of
So
course,
they decided they were never going to monetize them, or maybe they were, but they decided the giving up control is less important than being seen. So the only
That's
thing
quite
worse
telling,
than
yeah.
right than piracy is anonymity, right?
And I think that really does say a lot about conditions of subjectivity within late capitalism, that people are sort of talking about this shift to, individual recognition within society rather than what is the space of collective, when we're all sharing stuff online and we're looking at how many likes our photographs get and how are they being disseminated and who sees them, and this quest to, in a way, your own personal analytics is based on how much you share and who you share with.
But I can't resist mentioning this, though, that now we only have capitalism in the world and we don't have the other. But when we had communism, which seemed to be a going concern for about 70 years, they may not have been about monetization, but they surely were about control.
And what would you say to the kind of criticism of Creative Commons where you're still, obviously about controlling property and rights? Have you spoken to many people who are critical?
Yes, absolutely. So there are copyright absolutists, and there are people who feel, of course, that culture and creativity should be free, that copyright shouldn't be dominant, and it certainly shouldn't be thought of as a property right. And I think everybody in Creative Commons has their own opinion, and I think copyright is too extensive. But I think it, correctly formulated, it serves a useful purpose. Useful meaning a benign purpose, and that we give people a choice. Just to be clear, I'm glad you brought this up. If you use a Creative Commons license, you are asserting your copyright. You said this. You are saying this is mine, and because it's mine, I can do anything I want with it. And what I want to do is click, click, click. I want to do just this. I don't want all rights like this. I want people to be able to use it this way. We actually have another system where you can give up all rights, but that sits on the side. So there, of course, there's criticism of Creative Commons as being a running dog of materialism.
With just to follow up on that, then do you file your copyright with the Library of Congress?
So here's the funny thing about copyright. It used to be you had to file your copyright, and now you don't. You own the copyright. If you file, you get extra protections and that sort of thing. So the copyright is yours if you've made the work. That's different for some other types of work, but for photographs, if you've made the work, the copyright is yours. yes, you get an extra kind of protection.
This is a question for Katrina, and it might be a dumb one, so I apologize. Why did you have to get copyright for your cat show? Why couldn't you just put the pictures up? Is
Well,
it
that's
a
an
kind of
interesting question. In the end, I didn't put any of the lolcats, which are like lime cat, long cat, and cappy cat, in the show, because trying to find the original copyright holders, well, they're born out of violation of copyright in the first place, so it's an impossible task. And I had so much other stuff there. I was very interested in actually bringing the work of communities into that show and getting them to kind of curate, because I don't need to curate cat photography. Lots of people are out there doing it already. So it was just getting them into the museum. But in terms of lolcats and that sort of thing, in the end, it was too much. And even if I put live web pages on a screen in the gallery, I got advice that under UK copyright law, that would still be a problem because it's like broadcasting. So it is a very slippery area. But in the end, what the advice would be to a cultural institution is how much risk are you willing to take in relation to that? And so, but it does mean that if you wanted to present the 100 variations of Longcat and the memes he spawned in a gallery, the amount of time and effort to track down any of that is just impossible. So yeah, there's this question about how we record, document, and remember digital culture because of these issues.
I have a kind of a two-part question. The first part is where copyright is concerned, does the device owner, the equipment owner that used certain device to take a photograph, retain any rights in copywriting?
No.
None at all? So I could grab anyone's camera and take a photo and it would be mine? Great.
There's a physical right and this copyright, so-called intellectual property right. So on the intellectual property question, yes. On the physical question, it's their camera and their film or media or so.
So maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, the second question I had is Google Earth is taking photos of our entire world. If you go in and look at Street View, you can see people with faces blacked out or blurred out, and you really can gain access to all kinds of photographic information. Who retains rights to those photos?
So that's, why don't you take that one? That sounds like a more fun question if you answered it. But my answer is pretty boring. My answer is, that's not a copyright question. That's a question in the rights of personality and gets into questions of defamation, so that's a different question. Somebody asked me this morning to sign a release so that what we're doing here could be used. That wouldn't be a copyright question. But I'd be happy to, let's talk about it after. Okay. Because it's more detailed.
Okay, if I understand you, you're saying that if you want to promote yourself, then you can go the Creative Commons license direction and you'll get 10 million hits on Facebook. If you want to make money from your work, then you go the traditional copyright direction and you take the risk that you can sell your work. Is that basically what you're saying?
No. And that's, I'm glad you asked the question because that's a kind of polar simplification that misses some subtleties that are more important. So, for example, if you can go to, Creative Commons doesn't host any work. The work, we have no work on our servers. So if you've got a website, Parsons had a website, some photographer has a website, you can tag your work with our license. You could choose a non-commercial license. Non-commercial means anybody can use it in Parsons, they can use it at home, they can use it this way, but gee, maybe 10,000 people are going to see it, go crazy, and then Disney is going to say, I need this thing, and then they'll come to you and make whatever deal you and they want, because you won't have given up the commercial rights. So it's much more, that's why I said it's kind of a spectrum of rights we have.
Other photographers might release certain images as Creative Commons in order to generate the traffic to go back to their site, where they will sell prints. And I've heard of photographers making a lot of money who were skeptical at first through the way in which traffic and sharing works on the internet.
Or, for example, another maybe one wonderful example is musicians and songwriters record and put a few songs on Creative Commons with no restrictions at all. Use them this way, use them commercially, put them in a movie, put them in a soundtrack, I don't care. And then the world, instead of people having to find their lawyer and somebody heard it and make a deal which compresses the use, the world hears about this thing and this musician and says, wow, that guy's great. And that has led to some people having more interesting careers because their work gets out there. Only, 5 songs, not the 100 others.
Question over here. We'll take 1 or 2 more questions.
Just going back to those astronauts for a minute who were jealous of the NASA ones, it seems that really affirms Flusser's idea that all endeavors are now geared towards the photographic image or the universe of the technical image, and that even science, right? And that furthermore, that even if those images will not be monetized on the first go round, there's some sort of sociocultural stake in the future monetization of the program that's related to the public appearing of that. So I'm just thinking about the idea that there's no, the operative imaginary here, that there's no alternative to capitalism, right? That in some ways, whatever alternatives there might be have disappeared historically. And that would be the kind of imaginary one would maintain if one continued to talk in this mode, I guess. So my question is sort of about pedagogy and also things like, those who think of themselves as anarchists or Marxist feminists or anti-racists who don't want to live in a society which is condemned to hierarchy and a planet of slums, 2 billion people living on $2 a day. What are we supposed to tell our students? What are we supposed to do as practicing artists and activists in relationship to this set of laws, which is trying to impose proprietary standards on all of our practices?
That's my favorite question of the year.
Do you want me to have a stab at that first?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's a question that I share. And I think, well, first of all, I'm of a sort of generation that was using the internet before it had pictures. And, you see the kind of heroic hope of what the internet could have been. And now there is, if you see current debate, the way in which it's like a massive advertising platform now that's tracking and tracing of mass surveillance. And in a sense, we shouldn't have been surprised that eventually it would be completely monetized in this way. But I think for me, the politics of photography today is not to represent things, but to represent representation in a way, and actually pay attention to the kinds of dynamics of the network and of the kind of social relationships which emerge, and educating young people in the politics of software, of these technologies. That's my short answer.
So hard to give a complete answer, but so there is no alternative system now. The competing systems had promise and have fallen down. Maybe there's some small ones around the world, but the Soviet system and all the rest of it just doesn't exist anymore and had its terrible flaws. That's a whole other discussion. So my first job as a lawyer was as a public defender in Seattle, and I defended people without money for various crimes, et cetera. And then I went back and made a film about that type of work. And then I decided, and it was shown on ABC, but then I owned the rights to it. I decided I would like it. Then Creative Commons came along. I decided, I think I'll license this under Creative Commons. And the license I made was a non-commercial license. Non-commercial, non-derivative, meaning you can't use it for commercial use and you can't change it and do this or that with it. I made the non-derivative choice because I had made promises to the people who were in my film that they would be represented fairly, and I didn't feel like if anybody could edit it, and many of you may feel that same type of responsibility. So that was the choice about the non-derivative. Non-commercial, I think that wasn't a good choice, and I will change it now. And the reason why is the film itself represents what I feel. If students, I used to teach, when students looked at it, they understood what it represented. And if somebody uses it to sell, puts a Coca-Cola ad on the end of it, I guess I got to say that's the world we live in, and people will become wiser and wiser about that, or else we're all sunk pretty much. That's not a good way to end. We're all sunk pretty much. So I think people are becoming, some people are becoming smarter about understanding those differences. And do you teach here? Where do you teach? At Pratt. So I'm sure you talk to your students about these issues. But I don't think there's a walled garden anymore that high-minded people can make for high-minded work. I think those days are over.
Is that?
How are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Can you take one more, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just we'll do one more question and we'll end. There's a question over here.
I was just interested in, because we're talking about things like Flickr and all that, and using images. I was curious about with YouTube, where people use music and then they put, they either sample it or they just use the whole song and then they put credits or a disclaimer. Like, how does that work exactly? What's the legality of that as far as copyright and everything?
Right. So I mentioned, the answer is clear. I'll just do it quickly, and then we can talk about it more if you want to.
Okay.
The Digital Millennium Copyright Act protects YouTube and Google from responsibility for copyright violations for people who post work up until they know about it. So constantly, music companies are filing things. They have the music recognition. They say, oh, this YouTube video of the cat has music from 10 Inch Nails. That's
9 Inch Nails.
What a mistake. And you've got to take it down. And if they don't take it down, then YouTube has committed a violation. And the person who posts it probably has already committed a violation, but nobody's going to care that much because YouTube will probably take it down. And YouTube now offers, thanks for this opportunity to put in a plug, a way for people who get a notice from YouTube the next day saying, I'm going to stick with 10 Inch Nails. That 10 Inch Nails song is yours, and we've taken it down. You can go click on YouTube and look at Creative Commons songs that have been offered by thousands of artists in case you want to use one of those.
That's cool.
Thanks for the plug. And I also want to amend the answer over there when I said that world isn't here anymore. I'm not sure that world was ever here, to tell you the truth, this non-commercial utopia. Oh, even better.
Can I just ask one last question of you, which is, since Flickr allows Getty to license images on users' behalf, has there been less Creative Commons licensing by users of Flickr? Have they gone down the Getty route, or do you have any statistics on that since that option was introduced?
I don't know.
Okay.
The founder of, or a founder of Flickr is a friend and on the board, and I could ask her. I don't know.
Thank you so much, Katrina and Eric.